So growing up, my mom always told us to, wherever you go, know your landmarks. Okay, know where you are. If you don't see any signs, look at landmarks. Like, make it a point to recognize what your surroundings are, just in case you get lost along the way. Relationships can serve as landmarks too. Let's talk about it. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, and up your you. I'm your host, Isaiah. It's fall, which means that leaves are changing, the seasons are changing. It's spooky season. It's my favorite time of year. And if you've been listening to this podcast for some time, you know that usually I try to go big or go home in the month of October. And this year is a little bit different, not necessarily in a bad way, but just different. A lot of things have been going on. A lot of pieces have been shifting, honestly. And, today's episode, I just want to dive into the inevitable shifts that occur in our relationships, but also life, during moments of personal growth, when it does feel like everything is changing, nothing is the same. You might be trying to hold on really tight to certain things and places and experiences, and sometimes you honestly may be ready to release a lot of things, and you'll know. And I think the most important thing is recognizing when that change happens, how to properly navigate it, or not being fearful or completely frustrated by the ambiguity, you know. And it's so funny because I think for myself as of recent, it's just been a real growth moment, and when you're growing, a lot of times it does feel as if you are not, it feels like nothing's making sense or nothing's really happening. There might be a feeling of stagnancy, and it's not always rooted in any truth. It's just this idea that growth is always supposed to be this perceived busyness. Okay, it's supposed to be something that's I don't know. It's like an event. Like there has to be a million and eight things happening, and it has to be an external representation of your growth. And the funny thing is, and this is always what's interesting when we talk about success in life. Success, it's usually determined by the monetary aspects, but we see success as we want the end goal of success, or we want the idea of success, or we want the results of it. And a lot of times it's easy to forget the process of success. And I think this is where people typically get scared. This is where I find myself to sometimes be a little hesitant in certain moments. But, still fearing forward. But nonetheless, there are a lot of questions that come up, a lot of moments of, well, wait, what is actually going on? What is this actually telling me? What do I need to know? Am I doing things right? And it's so interesting when we do grow as individuals, because our relationships are usually a great indicator of what we are growing through, or what we've outgrown, or what we're growing into. And I think this was an episode I did last year called Survivor's Remorse, in terms of, what it looks like to outlive certain dynamics, certain connections, or what you thought was supposed to be a part of the rest of your life and outliving it. Like you survive the occupation, you survive the relationship, and you know, you leave very familiar places. You leave very familiar spaces. And like I was saying before, my mom, so growing up, one of the things she taught us, and I'm so grateful she did because it just helps. Like it's a thing. She's always said, if you are going somewhere and you don't see any street signs, always look for landmarks. If you're traveling somewhere that's unfamiliar, always look for landmarks to get you back to where you are, or at least gain some level of familiarity, or so you just know where you're going altogether. And I didn't think about it in a different way until recently. Sometimes our relationships can function as landmarks in terms of where we have been in life, where we are going, if we ever plan to actually make a return, or is it just kind of understanding this is a pit stop along the way. And sometimes there could even be guilt there. There could be a level of guilt you may feel when you recognize that how you felt about a relationship at one point, you no longer feel that way. Okay? The feeling is not there. And you might try to force it, okay? Or, the other person may not have those same feelings anymore. And there might be a level of forcing or even frustration. And I think in our adult lives, it is truly something to be mindful of, but also kind of appreciate. I don't think we always appreciate the grief that comes with growth, right? I don't think we fully acknowledge what that actually looks and feels like. We just don't, because I think we try to avoid the discomfort of growth. We try to avoid the reality that, growth means outgrowing also. It doesn't always serve as, it's such this positive feeling. Healthy things don't always taste good. Like, if you hate broccoli won't always taste good, but it's healthy for you, right? It has a lot of great health benefits. But in the moment while you're consuming it, it's like, oh, this is gross. And after a while, you may consume it and you may look past the fact that it's disgusting and, learn, oh, this does benefit me in a very big way. I personally love broccoli, so it's never been an issue. But you get what I'm saying? Like a lot of things that are healthy for us, we will not always value or even desire to have a part of our process or our consumption. And what's funny is that I think with growth as a whole, and even when we are outgrowing relationships, you never want to recognize that a person that you were close to, or even family members sometimes, like you are outgrowing that. You might even be outgrowing what you once were pursuing. What you were willing to give your all to has now become kind of secondary. And you can feel it. Honestly, you can feel when that thing or that person is no longer at the forefront of your mind, is no longer something that you care to devote much time to. And sometimes you will feel guilty. There will be guilt there, or sometimes there might be resentment there. Okay? I think it's such a crucial part of life that no one really talks about. It's like dealt with in secret. Okay? Like I'm not supposed to be affected by this person. I'm not supposed to be talking about it. I just got to put my best foot forward and yada, yada, yada. But I think when you are actually experiencing it and recognizing it, that experience is a lot more interesting. It's a lot more layered, okay? There's a lot more nuance. And even if it's an amicable, outgrowing of one another, I think if the person or dynamic was important to you, it's still going to feel some kind of way. And one thing I also realized is like people as a whole, like none of us like being rejected. No one likes being rejected. but we are all okay doing it. And when I say okay doing it, it's not even that we'll have a conversation with another person or whatever, but we are okay beyond the end of I am needing to release this connection, or this connection doesn't serve me anymore, or this thing, insert whatever. We are very cool rejecting others, but no one likes being rejected, even by someone that they don't care about or haven't really shown a level of care. Sometimes we don't always even care about having the relationship with the person. We just care about the fact that we are being rejected. Okay, or it's a perceived rejection. And again, I think there is a lot of guilt that's attached to certain releases or certain disconnects. And there's a difference between, a genuine disconnection and potentially an avoidance of certain things, like, avoiding unnecessary conversation, avoiding your responsibility to repair. It's really important to understand what it's coming from. And I think it's also crucial to recognize when it's like a genuine disconnection, or is it guilt? Is it guilt riding you in terms of what you should be doing, what you should be feeling, what's necessary, who's necessary to keep around? Like, what is it? And again, going back to the landmarks, I think what's cool is that if people in your life are a landmark of where you are going or where you've been, it's also necessary to look at what that relationship is. What has it been for an extended period of time, right? What has it dealt out? Like, what has been the recurring pattern of this connection with this other person? And it's so funny because I think when it comes to friendship, the common rhetoric is like, oh, we just outgrew each other. We just outgrew each other. That's why we don't talk anymore. That's why we're not friends anymore. However, it is so interesting when people, they have these romantic partnerships for an extended period of time. And it's like that person is a person just like that other individual. Both people are individuals that at one point in time you may have actually deemed important, but now you've chosen, this is an active choice to sustain this relationship. And it's different. And I don't think people are always honest about that. We don't necessarily outgrow everybody we're no longer talking to. We just avoid people that we probably owe an apology to, an explanation to, or just simply being honest about how we feel. But the fact that we can sustain these romantic partnerships, even when we're miserable, right? I think that's what's interesting. Like in when it comes to friendship, it's like, oh yeah, we outgrew each other. When it comes to partnerships, it's like, oh, here's 1,000 ways to keep this going. So again, when you are growing as an individual, it is really necessary and cool to just acknowledge, what do my surroundings look like? How far have I actually gotten? What stayed the same? What has developed since then? What has reminded me of what work I need to do? Like, what are these relationships representing for me? Okay, what are they representing for me? What have they represented? And do they look any different from the people that I currently have in my life? Okay, there can be a lot of discomfort that comes with leaving familiar spaces. Okay, and the familiarity when it comes to spaces isn't always a physical space. It could just be a familiar relationship. It just will not align like it used to. Right? And sometimes I think what we have confused is this idea of what love is. And I always say it's like, you can love people that you may never speak to again. You may never speak to them again. However, you still have a very considerate love for them. And if you can accept that, if you can recognize, hey, I can still love this person from a distance and we're going to be just fine. Sometimes I think we don't realize that not having a relationship with another person is the healthiest thing you can do for you and yourself, because people overlook the fact that, when you keep somebody in your life or vice versa, resentment builds, especially if there is a lack of just a nurture or maturity or even consideration for one another, resentment kind of starts to take the place of what's been going on. And that relationship that once was isn't even there anymore. It's a new one. And this new one is founded on this idea that this person does not value me, or I may not realize I don't value this person. Okay? People can definitely be landmarks for us in terms of where we are going and where we want to go. And as much as we try to avoid discomfort, sometimes it will really, truly, and genuinely show us how well we are doing in this growing process, but also like if we really are moving in the way that we say we want to, or is it just talk? I noticed for myself, there have been a lot of changes, and I've been having conversations with my friends recently, and just kind of talking about this idea of growth and what it has felt like lately. And it's been so uncomfortable. I'm not even gonna lie to you, it has been so uncomfortable. But I look at the landmarks in my life, like I look at the connections I still have in my life and that have been growing with me throughout this time, and I'm like, okay. And then I ask myself, well, what is the significance of these connections that they continue to exist? Right? What is the dynamic here that reminds me that this is what's worth it, and this is supposed to be a part of my process? Like, what is that? And I think for yourself, it is so crucial and so necessary to get in the habit of just taking a good look around, taking a good look at your landmarks. Because sometimes we are in such this pursuit of getting everything right or things being perfect. Sometimes we don't even know what perfect looks like because it doesn't exist. Okay, we have this expectation, and that expectation could come from somewhere else. Okay, it could be an external projection. It can be, insecurities. It sometimes what we have in our head isn't even a clear picture yet, which is why in moments of uncertainty, in moments of rest, in moments of pause, in moments of transition, we get frustrated because a lot of times we think, oh, I'm failing. This is not working out. But sometimes everything is working out. And this is something I've been realizing. You need to make room for what it is you say you desire in life. Like, you need to make room for what it is that you say that you want. And sometimes if you are thinking that you haven't really made it that far, I want you to just take a look at your relationships. And I want you to even ask yourself, even as we get older, what has changed in our relationship dynamic? And change can be good. Change isn't always like distance or anything bad, but just looking at what has transpired in this connection. Is it the same as it was when we first became whatever? Okay. Sometimes you will realize your relationships exist because you continue to be the one that's invested. That's why the relationship is so fruitful. Or that other person may realize it when it comes to you. It's relationships are two participants. Okay. And while we always think that we are the good guy and the other person is the bad guy, it could be different. It could be a different perspective if you're going about it honestly. But if you start to see your relationships as landmarks in terms of where you are in life and where you're going, even if certain things feel unfamiliar, just take a good look around, because you might have more of an idea of your process and your trajectory and your journey thus far than what you thought was actually going on. And I think that is so important. Being able to hold space for intention and ambiguity without growing resentful, without growing doubtful, okay, without losing yourself, without spiraling, without giving up. Like, I think all of it has the potential to exist if you are willing to just look at the landmarks. People really can be landmarks for you. And just because we are growing through our season doesn't mean somebody else is. It also doesn't mean that this person is meant to exist in this season or the seasons to come. Leave room for multiple truths, and I think you will have a more enjoyable process, even with ambiguity. Especially with ambiguity, because sometimes I always say, like, if we don't know what we're supposed to do next, that means we haven't there isn't anything to do. If you don't know what to do next, sometimes it's because there's nothing to do. All right, you will know what you need to when it's necessary. All right, so just take a look around and recognize, if it's a genuine disconnection, all right, or if it's something else, if it's guilt. What does the relationship represent? What has been the requirement for the relationship to exist? Can you continue to give that? Does the your new trajectory, your new goals, does it allow you to still have this relationship where it is? Just because we are changing does not always mean that the things around us are changing too. And as uncomfortable and as disappointing as that can be, you have to recognize that everybody has their own process. Okay? And you may need to leave familiar places to step into unknown territory in order to get what you desire, because that's where it is. All right? So that's just really something to think about, something I've been considering, all right? Because it keeps you from not getting resentful, keeps you from not getting bitter, jaded, or even giving up. And sometimes when you revisit certain spaces, you will realize why you left. Okay? So just something to think about. I hope this was clear. I've just been clearing my own fog and just really understanding what was necessary and really processing where I came from and where I am now. All right, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take flight.